So, I have a confession to make to my fellow sci-fi fans out there. I've never really liked Blade Runner. I know, it's blasphemy, right? I swear every time I reveal that, people act like I just said I hate sunshine and puppies. A lot of people seem to see this as one of those movies that's just beyond reproach. So perfect and brilliant that to criticize it is to admit you weren't smart enough to understand it. Well, I guess I'm not, because today I'm going to be complaining about Blade Runner. And I'll warn you, a lot of my complaints will involve comparing it to the source material, Philip K. Dick's Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. Some people would no doubt argue that I'd like the movie better if I viewed it as a standalone work. They're probably right, but I don't really like that defense. To me, that just seems like a tacit admission that the movie's a bad adaptation and they should have just made something original, which is a pretty big flaw to me. Besides, sometimes when you want to criticize something, it helps to have something to compare it to. And just to be clear, my problem isn't just that they changed things. Anytime a story is adapted from one medium to another, it means making changes. My favorite film adaptation of a book is American Psycho, a movie that takes plenty of liberties with the story of the novel, but still completely nails the characters, themes, and ideas that made that story so interesting. In Blade Runner, by contrast, so many of the changes just undermine the ideas that made the book so compelling. And as someone who loves the book, that bugs me. Anyway, let's dive in. And yes, this will contain spoilers for both the book and the movie. First, let me get the praise out of the way, because there is a lot to like in this movie. It's a visual masterpiece. I may have my complaints about Ridley Scott, but let it never be said that he's not a master of special effects and cinematography. This movie has some of the best miniature work I've ever seen. Meanwhile, the sets, the costumes, the props, the lighting are all wonderfully atmospheric. Also, a couple of the scenes are really effective at building tension and excitement. Mainly that first scene with the Void Conf test and the face-off with Batty at the end. Speaking of which, Rutger Hauer gives a great performance in this movie.
You better get it up. I'm gonna have to kill you. Unless you're alive. You can't play, and if you don't play...
Anyway, that's about it. Let's talk about the writing. By the way, when I talk about the book, I'm going to be using pages from the 2009 comic book series as a visual aid, since it follows the exact text of the novel. I want to start by talking about the character of Rick Deckard. The version of Deckard we see in the film is just such a boring protagonist. He has no meaningful motivation or backstory to make him sympathetic. Doesn't really have much of a personality either. Harrison Ford's acting definitely doesn't help. I don't know if they were slipping him Valium or what, but this is the most sedate, monotone performance I've ever seen from him.
Implants. Those aren't your memories. They're somebody else's. They're Tyrell's nieces.
You play beautifully.
At the beginning of the film, we learn he's quit the Force for unspecified reasons. The film doesn't seem interested in exploring that. As far as I can tell, this scene is just an excuse for him to swing his dick around while refusing the call to adventure. Anyway, we learn that Deckard's replacement, Holden, is the guy who got shot in the first scene, and that the police chief is going to force Deckard to go back to work because he's just the best Blade Runner there ever was.
I need the old Blade Runner. I need your magic.
It was quit when I come in here, Brian. I'm twice as quit now.
Stop right where you are. You know the score, pal. You're not cops, you're little people.
So that's his motivation for all this. They just made him do it. I guess this could be an interesting motivation if they played up the conflict between him and his department, but that would require them to elaborate on some kind of emotional inner life for this character. I guess it was easier to just let him stand around speechless a lot and let the soundtrack imply that he has feelings. But really, the only thing he seems to be invested in is banging this one robot. But that's getting ahead of myself. Oh, don't worry, I'll get to this movie's sad excuse for a romantic subplot. One step at a time. So let's compare that to Book Deckard. Funnily enough, the setup is the opposite here. Holden was the senior officer who was considered better at his job, and when he gets hospitalized, the department turns to the inexperienced junior officer, Deckard. In the book, Deckard isn't called a Blade Runner, stupid title. He's called a bounty hunter because he gets paid by the kill. And that's where his motivation comes from. He wants the money so he can buy an animal. This is going to take some explaining. So in the book, Dick paints a picture of a society that nominally values empathy above all things, and they express that empathy through consumerism. Owning animals has become a status symbol. The more rare and valuable the animal, the better. Deckard thinks about this constantly. He has a catalog he carries around that he's always looking through, thinking about the different animals he wants to buy but can't afford. One of the first scenes is him being jealous of his neighbor's horse. Then when he gets to the office and finds out that the senior bounty hunter is in the hospital and he has 6 new targets, he gets excited because he figures he can buy a really nice animal if he gets them all. I think it's important to note that Deckard's desire doesn't seem to come from loving animals or anything. It's more like he just expects it to make him and his frequently depressed wife happy because that's what they're expected to want. The same way someone might want a bigger house or a flashy luxury car, even if it wouldn't really make them happier day to day. After all, he's a man shaped by the culture he lives in. This might seem like esoteric motivation, but that's kind of the point. Deckard is an emotionally lost man who doesn't really know what he wants, so he does what's expected of him. There's a lot of interesting social commentary here, but in the movie he just feels like Cop Man who's stoic. Let's move on to my favorite character in the book, J.R. Isidore. In the movie they call him J.F. Sebastian, but it's clearly meant to be the movie's version of the same character. It's the naive, trusting guy who tries to help the androids. In the movie, he's mostly a plot device, so I'm going to talk about the character in the book first, where he's much more important. He's actually the other point of view character besides Deckard. JR is what this society politely refers to as a special, and less politely refers to with a variety of slurs. These are people who've suffered brain damage as a result of the radioactive fallout and toxic environment. So he's a stuttering, mentally handicapped man who lives in a rotting, abandoned building because he's been cast out by mainstream society. He's only tolerated among normal people when he's at work, and even then is the object of ridicule and derision. Despite his poor treatment, he's extremely empathetic, treating every life form, down to the insects in his building, as a miracle worthy of care and preservation. This makes him an excellent foil for Deckard, who treats life as a commodity to be acquired or disposed of based on his needs. When he meets Pris the android, who's hiding out in his building, we see how painfully lonely and desperate for companionship he is. Everything about this character is just so tragic. And that tragedy is driven home by the irony that in this society that claims to value empathy, the most loving, caring, selfless person we meet is someone who's been cast out as deviant. In the movie, J.F. Sebastian is a genius inventor who is presumably rich because he's a top scientist for the Tyrell Corporation, but chooses to live in an abandoned building by himself because he's quirky or something.
Must get lonely here, Chad.
Not really. I make friends. They're toys. My friends are toys. I make them. It's a hobby. I'm a genetic designer.
The movie attempts to preserve his childlike demeanor, but it really doesn't play the same way when he's a genius scientist with a respectable job who lives here by choice making robots because he likes them better than people. I really want to emphasize how important JR is to the book. He's the other main character, and everything about his life perfectly demonstrates the callous hypocrisy of this world. Here, he's just a dumb guy whose life was fine till the androids trick him so the plot can move forward. Okay, let's talk about Rachel. And let me start by saying one thing here. I am going to talk a bit about book Rachel, but I would hate this character in the movie even if there was no book. She's the perfect example of a paper-thin Hollywood love interest character who's irrationally attached to the main character for no adequately explained reason. Like, why does she even seek out Deckard when she runs away? She's barely met this guy, and when she did, he acted completely cold and aloof. Also, it's his job to kill runaway androids. And yet, for no apparent reason, she goes straight to him. And oh god, now I have to talk about this scene. I cringe every time I see this. Why did they make this scene so weirdly rapey? Like, this isn't some Han and Leia situation where he's a little pushy, but it comes off playful, and we know it's okay because they have a previously established relationship and we know they care about each other. This is just creepy.
Will you kiss me?
I can't rely on.
Say, kiss me.
And I know a lot of people would defend this scene with in-universe justification. You know, something, she's an android, so it's not what it looks like. But even if we accept that, just look at it from a language of film perspective. Why would you want your big romance scene to be so eerily reminiscent of sexual assault? Because that's what it looks like. It just looks like a guy intimidating a small crying woman into having sex with him. Why? Why are you doing this to me, Ridley Scott? I don't want to talk about this. Oh, but don't worry. The soundtrack is here to tell us how we're supposed to feel. In the book, the reason Rachel seeks out Deckard is that she's actually kind of a double agent. She's trying to stop him from finding and killing the other androids. This is also why she sleeps with him. It's an attempt to distract him, but she also confesses afterwards that she hoped being close to her would make him more empathetic towards androids and not want to complete his mission. This doesn't work. After Deckard has finished his targets, Rachel's last act in the book is when she goes to his house while he's out and, as a final act of revenge, kills the new goat he bought with the bounty money from killing 3 of her friends. So yeah, pretty different from Rachel in the movie.
Do you love me?
I love you.
Do you trust me?
I trust you.
Alright, let's get to the big ending. Deckard goes back to JF's apartment and has a fight with Pris. Actually, she seems to have him completely under control. Like, she disarmed him and could clearly just kill him now, but then for no reason she gets off him and runs to the other side of the room so she can start flipping towards him. What the hell is this? I'm sorry, I try not to dwell on minor stuff like this, but I just can't get over it. What is she doing? Some kind of anime power-up move? I mean, I guess she just really likes flipping. That's her thing, or something. Whee! So after that nonsense, Deckard has an extended chase scene through the building with Batty, which is actually pretty cool. Then Batty saves his life, which seems like a pretty sudden and unprompted change of heart. I mean, he just killed Sebastian, who was trying to help him, and now suddenly he chooses to help the guy who killed all his friends? This is not a character arc, it's more like a character U-turn. I'm sure a lot of people would tell me that I just don't get it, but I actually think I get it perfectly. They wanted to have an uplifting ending, so suddenly this guy who's been acting like a movie villain the whole time becomes all selfless for an inspirational moment. Because this is the kind of movie where characters do things not because they make sense, but because they're poetic. Ooh, look, he's putting a thing through his hand. That means he's Jesus now, guys. I'm a film critic. This scene is the definition of melodrama. Like, the actual definition. I mean, motherfucker's up here with stigmata and a dove. Could it be any more pretentious? Anyway, the book is nothing like this. Now might be a good time to mention that in the book, the androids don't have superpowers. Yeah, they added that for the movie. Presumably to raise the stakes and add more action, although it doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, why do you need these empathy tests if you could just test their skin? It's clearly not human flesh if they can punch through steel and not get burned by boiling water. Oh well, don't think about it. So yeah, in the book, the android's last stand is actually pretty quick and pathetic. Deckard executes the unarmed Batty without hesitation as Batty is mourning his last comrade, then reacts coldly as JR cries over the bodies. There's no beautiful, uplifting moment, and Deckard ends the story as the same lost, unhappy soul he started as. I guess pretty words and doves go over better with audiences. Okay, there's one more thing I have to talk about before I can wrap this up, and that's this stupid unicorn. Apparently, this is supposed to imply that Deckard might be an android. Naturally, right? I'll let Looper explain.
So, is replicant hunter Rick Deckard actually an android? This scene suggests the answer is a definite yes. After dreaming of a unicorn earlier in the film, Deckard finds and fondles this origami version, which must have been made by Eduardo Gaff, the veteran LAPD Blade Runner and origami maker who orders Deckard around. But Deckard isn't exactly the type to open up to his coworkers about his nighttime fantasies, which means the only way Gaff could possibly know Deckard dreams about unicorns is that he somehow read Deckard's memory file.
Okay, let's actually break down the logic here. So Deckard is an android, and for no reason, his creators gave him implanted memories about unicorns. Then he has a handler who, for no reason, leaves origami around at work. Then on the rooftop after Batty dies, he shows up and, for no reason, says a couple lines that maybe imply that Deckard is an android. Then, for no reason, he rushes back to Deckard's apartment to beat him there and leave an origami unicorn on the floor. Why do people think this is clever?
Ridley Scott has already said that when it comes to the Deckard question, if you don't get it, you're a moron.
Oh yeah, I guess I'm the idiot for being confused by this. I mean, it makes so much sense. Deckard's creators gave him unicorn dreams because that's just a thing you do, and now this guy leaves an origami unicorn for Deckard to taunt him, I guess? I mean, I get that it's supposed to be some kind of message, but why? They were just talking. Why does he need to leave esoteric clues around like he's the fucking Riddler? This is not a plot twist. It's just a cheap trick thrown in to make you go, but who was phone? Fun fact, this unicorn first appeared in the 1991 director's cut of the film, and it's actually unused footage that Scott recorded for the 1985 film Legend. Another Ridley Scott movie which is best left forgotten. So is this really the storyline that was always intended? Or is Ridley Scott just making this up as he goes and calling people stupid for not getting it? I'll let you decide. My theory is that it was originally thrown in as a lazy sequel hook. This was an era when Star Wars ruled the box office, and I doubt the producers would have sunk in all this money without some hope of their own sci-fi mega franchise. But those plans would have been scrapped when the movie had a disappointing release, leaving this scene kind of disconnected and pointless. Then someone came up with all this later as a way to make the movie seem more deep and interesting than it really is. That's just speculation, but we explain why Scott gets so defensive when he's asked about this.
Ridley, I'm curious about Harrison Ford, working with him on the original Blade Runner, and how
He's a replicant. He's a fucking replicant.
It's so...
The book also plays with the idea that Deckard could be an android, but it accomplishes this more by casting doubt on the entire system. At various times in the book, it's implied that the Void Comp test might not be as reliable as Deckard has been led to believe. His department is worried that the newer android models might be able to pass the test, and while we never see a confirmed case of this in the book, it's clearly theoretically possible. In one particularly interesting conversation, Deckard and his superior, Bryant, discuss the possibility of a human failing the test, and Bryant comments that if it did happen, it would definitely be kept a secret, which begs the question of whether this has already happened. It seems possible that the Void Comp test fails all the time, and the government refuses to acknowledge it because it's the last tool they have to maintain the illusion of control. It's also worth mentioning that many humans, including Deckard and his wife, seem to be completely dependent on the device called the mood organ, which essentially lets you program your own emotions so you can feel however you want to. So a lot of the feelings they're so proud of having are essentially manufactured simulations. See, the book is more interested in making you question the actual differences between humans and androids and whether those differences really matter, whether human life really is as special as we think it is. Isn't that ambiguity more interesting than this half-assed twist? Clearly these two works had very different visions, and personally, I find the ideas in the book so much more interesting. This toxic, dying world where what little life still exists has to be commodified and controlled. A society that obsesses over moral posturing and consumerism even as their civilization crumbles around them. The alienation of the individual from their role in society. The movie's vision seems to be more about religious themes. Ridley Scott must really like this concept of seeking out your creator to ask for immortality. He used it in Prometheus too. Maybe I'd like that idea more if Roy Beatty had been the protagonist instead of this boring guy. In any case, this movie's just not nearly as smart as it thinks it is. I mean, there are episodes of Star Trek that have more profound things to say about the nature of consciousness and the implications of AI. Maybe I'm expecting too much, but it's hard not to when the source material is something so bold and thoughtful and unique. Maybe if I didn't know the book, I'd be more inclined to be charitable. I mean, I would definitely still hate some parts, but maybe I'd be able to focus more on the good things. I still think it's overrated, though. Not only that, but it reminds me of an indifferent Hollywood system that turns everything unique into bland, unchallenging melodramas with pretensions of intellectualism. Funnily enough, I did enjoy the recent sequel, Blade Runner 2049. I mean, it's got a sympathetic protagonist with compelling motivation, that's a good start. Even Deckard has more personality in this one.
Is it real? I don't know. Ask him.
The twists and turns of the plot are all set up well and make sense. And it accomplished all that with the same level of visual flair that I liked in the original. And ironically, even though this one had nothing to do with the story of the book, it actually feels like a more worthy successor. Because in true Philip K. Dick fashion, it plays with our sense of what's real, of who's real, in ways that are really emotionally resonant. Unlike a certain movie which just kind of vaguely nods at those ideas without having anything interesting to say about them. At least I got something I like out of this franchise.
I don't know why he saved my life. Maybe in those last moments he loved life more than he ever had before. Not just his life. Anybody's life. My life. All he'd wanted were the same answers the rest of us want. Where do I come from? Where am I going? How long have I got? All I could do was sit there and watch him die.